Take it away.
Thanks, Brett, and welcome everyone. My name is Kate Stewart. I'm a VP of Dependable Embedded Systems here at the Linux Foundation and have been with Zephyr Project pretty much since its start back 5 years ago. Uh, Zephyr is sort of very special to me in the sense that, and to actually all the community members in the sense that we've been trying to do and apply best practices throughout its development. So welcome. I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about what Zephyr is up to these days and give you an overview of the project so that next week can be more effective for you. So let's just start off with the vision with Zephyr. When we started it off, we wanted to make sure we could actually create the best-in-class RTOS. And we knew we needed to do this in resource-constrained environments for devices that Linux is not going to be a good fit for. So Zephyr is not Linux. It's for when Linux is just too big. But we still need to have that security factors, and we still want to be able to use it in context where we need to know it's going to be safe to use, and there's going to be, there may be some safety critical implications with it. So we started with this vision right from the start, and we launched the project in February of 2016, and we launched it with the view that we were going to have an open source real-time operating system. And over the years now, it has grown to have a very vibrant community, mostly because we've been wanting to make sure that we actually had it to be vendor neutral. We did not want it to be controlled by any one company or organization. And this has built up a rather healthy ecosystem of people who can see how they can add the bits that they care about and take care, and be able to leverage the pieces that others. So we started off with the view that we were going to be going after safety and security certifications, and that has stayed true, and we're executing on the vision now. And I'll go into more details about that a little bit later. But Zephyr is not locked to one specific hardware architecture. There's a broad set of system-on chips and development board support available for it now. It is permissively licensed with the Apache 2 license, and so that tends to make it amenable to certain situations for including in products. And I think one of the things that's really important to stress is Zephyr is very, very modular. And that flexibility lets you just basically build images to run on your firmware of what you just need. And like, there's lessons we've taken from Linux. And so like Linux, we're using device tree for describing the devices. And we've also adapted the notion of using a long-term support release every few years, in our case, so that we had the ability to let people who are making products not have to keep up with the development edge. But again, I'll go into more about that. And then we're just getting into the stage of being able to go after audits now, certifications, and we're using the auditable branch off the LTS for auditable, but again, more later. So in the 5 years we've been working with Zephyr, we're now starting to see the products emerge in the marketplace, which is super exciting. However, since Zephyr is embedded, it means that it's a bit of a detective game to figure out where these products actually are. There's no requirement that someone has to tell us that they made a product with Zephyr. That's not required in the license or anything else, though they do need to attribute per Apache that they have used Zephyr inside, in their notices that go with the product, but they don't have to be, telling back that, hey, you've got Zephyr here. So it's a bit of a detective game. And one of the things that I'd welcome participation from the community is that as you learn of a new product that's running Zephyr, just to please let us know on social. And so we can start to add it up to this splashboard of the products. But it varies. The very first one we came out with was with brush gaming, pretty much at the start. And then the most recent one that's just emerged that I'm aware of is the C-Sense Air, which is goes on to your bicycle and lets you track it in case someone steals your bike or you want to monitor where the travels and so forth. So there's a wide range of products that have emerged in terms of using the capabilities and power management and the communication abilities. And some of this you can sort of see if you go and look in our repo. There's actually a boards directory inside the Zephyr code base and in our docs, and all the supported boards are listed, and there's over 250 now for the code. And some of the people today are actually even making their reference development boards that are shipping with Zephyr. And so this is a sample of some of them that we're aware of. Now, Zephyr started, when we started the project off, there were 3 hardware architectures. There's the ARM M cores and the Intel x86. Over the last 5 years, a whole bunch of other parts of the architecture families have been added. The NIOS, the RISC-V, Spark, and Tensilica, and we have 32 and 64-bit implementations for some of these architectures available. So Zephyr has been, growing bit by bit, and if there's an architecture you want to see supported and you want to contribute, again, put in the request for comments and a pull request. We are not closed to any specific architecture. It just needs to fit within the frameworks we've been establishing. Now, when you go into the code base, you'll see that Zephyr has a fairly full OS stack. It's not just a kernel. There is a wide range of technologies that have been incorporated, from the Bluetooth Low Energy, the Wi-Fi, the CAN drivers, open threads there. And you can look at this from a perspective of, I don't need to use all of them all at the same time. I can just pick and choose. In fact, let's just go into the GitHub repo right now. And you can sort of see that we have the various kernel modules. The drivers are there that you're sort of seeing. And as you go in and explore, you'll see the CAN, crypto, and so forth. So the diagram you're seeing is just a reflection of what's in the repo. And if there's, but it isn't even all of it. So feel free to go into the code base and just explore and get familiar with it. A lot of the talks that will be happening next week will be going into details of some of these specific technologies. And if you're unfamiliar with what's there, go into the code, read the code, or we also have our docs. And from there, you can go in and look and see at the various boards, the demos, the APIs, how things are interfaced, and so forth. And, what boards are supported and guides. So we've tried to be pretty comprehensive in our documentation. And certainly if you see a problem with any of it, or it doesn't quite match up with the code you're seeing or something like that, definitely encourage you to open an issue in the project and let us know how we can improve things. Or even better, put in a pull request to fix it if you can see what the fix is. So, opening issues, just going into GitHub there, or pull request, same thing. But I guess the key point here is it is a full-featured OS, and it lets developers focus on just adding the bits that they need or creating the configurations that they need. And this is proving to be a very popular model. It's been, effective in Linux, and I think it's being very effective here in Zephyr, if not more so. Now, with that, it's one thing to develop code, but probably one of the key parts is being able to test it. And one of the things that Zephyr has done is we do have native execution on a POSIX compliance OS. So you can build Zephyr and run it as a native Linux application. We tend to use this extensively in the project for doing our testing and for doing our regression testing and so forth. But you can actually connect out. So in addition to sort of building it and doing basic runs, you can also connect out to some of the devices through this interface. And this also helps us reduce the requirements of hardware, all these hardware boards and this, constrained environments for, testing during development. So it makes it faster. So in the testing mini-conf, there'll be a lot more discussions in this type of area. But if in terms of POSIX on Zephyr, we actually do have an API. We've added, well, actually the community has added, to be completely blunt here, is like this is all community driven. So if you see a interface that has POSIX that you want to be using and you're not seeing it in Zephyr, requests are very much welcome. And we, welcome anyone, to do the work, because that helps make, other people be able to connect into the Zephyr through standard interfaces and enable Zephyr further. Now, Zephyr is structured with a mental model of code repositories in mind. What we've actually got is we've got a development, and this is where the current release is being worked on all the time. And so we refer to this as the development repository, and it's our main one. So right now we're working on the 2.6 release, hoping to have that out later today or over the weekend. And the rate of change in this repository is about 2 commits per hour when I looked at the stats recently. So we're sort of seeing over the course of a month of about over 120, 130 people working on the in the repo, and we're seeing about 1,400 commits going in. So it moves fast here, and not everyone wants to be, tracking that main tip, especially when they're, watching out for products that may need to do, updates on their part of the value. So every 2 years, or 2.5 actually, we've decided, we cut a long-term support release. And for Zephyr, it's not this one that's coming out this week, but it'll be the next one, is our intended to be long-term support. And we'll be supporting that for the next 2 years. We've been supporting our our LTS 1, which came out 2 years ago, for this period of time. And we've been, putting bug fixes and security fixes into it. So as we learn things that are key here in development, they are going backported into the long-term support release as well. And after we come out with our LTS 2, we're going to be taking a subset of it, and that's what we're going to be going through some of the audits for safety certification. So that's kind of the model we started with in 2015, and it's implemented slightly differently inside the Git repos, but that's a conceptual framework we're working with. Now that LTS, again, I'd like to stress that it is product focused. If it's got the features you need, I would encourage you to use it. It is kept current with the latest security updates, and it's suitable for new hardware. And it has had a much more extensive testing on it, and we are going into the same sort of extended cycle right now for testing and squashing bugs for the 2.7 release. But it's not going to be, an LTS is not going to be something that you'll be seeing the latest features on and the cutting edge. But that's where we have things going. Now, in terms of the LTS 1, which is the one that's been out for a while now, we have been updating it regularly. As key security fixes come through or bug fixes, we have been cutting releases and making it available. So people who want to just sort of pick up something that sort of maybe changes from a release perspective every 6 to 9 months, this is where roughly we're doing the updates. So the auditable branch I was talking about a little bit earlier, it's just going to be a subset of that LTS, and we're going to be keeping everything in sync all the way through. This is all tagged in the Git repo. There's more rigorous processes we're going to have to work with, and we're going through a stage right now of doing a lot of conversion to align with coding guidelines that we're going to be needing. And so you may hear discussions about the MISRA compliance. You may hear in the safety working group some of the testing, how we're mapping between the test cases and the code base and so forth. So there's a testing mini-conf, and then there'll be a safety mini-conf on Tuesday. And if you're interested in those types of topics, that's where the discussions will be having, in addition to some of the main track topics as well. Now, right from the start, we built in secure, we knew we were going to need to make sure we could have this be a secure RTOS, because there was other options out there when we started. And there still are, but we wanted to make sure that we were following best security practices known in the industry. And so a security committee was started back then and has been meeting every 2 weeks since then. One of the first things we did was, document our secure coding practices for the project. And so that is up there and available. And then a couple of years later, as the team, and the practices matured in the project, we actually registered as a CVE numbering authority directly with MITRE. And as part of doing that, we've also formed our own security incident response teams, and from the security committees volunteers. And we use that as a way of, figuring out what has to, happen, but also recognizing we're not going to get it all right from the start. And so we've been evolving. It's like security is not an endpoint; it's sort of an ongoing journey. One of the things that helped us along the way was there was a best practices badge defined by the Core Infrastructure Initiative. And there's about 3,800 projects that publicly list their processes and what they follow, so forth. And Zephyr is one of the, was one of the first to get a gold badge. There's only 7 that have a gold badge in this, which is following all the best practices known in the industry. And we're rather proud that we actually have achieved this and have managed to keep it through a couple of infrastructure transitions too. But if you're curious about the processes that Zephyr follows, I'd encourage you to sort of go look at. You can, I'll just bring it up. You can sort of see that it's broken down into basics, change control, what's happening, reporting, quality, security, analysis. And so you can sort of look and see, what best practices are there. There's automated test suites, there's things that are suggested and so forth, and functionality testing. And as they define these types of criteria, we're trying to meet them and improve the project as well. But if you spot anything, if you go there and have a look and spot anything that doesn't look quite right to you, or you're curious about it, please reach out to us. And like I say, the project evolves quickly, and we're trying to keep this up to date to reflect what's happening in the project. But there's a lot of moving parts here, so help is always welcome. And obviously from this side, because there's a lot of parts, we have to leverage automation. And so we are doing weekly covariety scans right now. We're working with Parasoft to integrate MISRA scans into the code base. And on every check-in, there's all a bunch of, conformance checks to the, guidelines for the project. So if you're curious more about the security in general, in our documentation, there is a security section. I'd encourage you to go in and read it and give us feedback. The Gold Best Practices badge I just went through. You can sort of go and start drilling down through each of these types of information criteria and have a look at it and see if you, and understand how the project is publicly asserting things. Just to give a bit of context here, there are 3,800 projects that are working towards badges. There's only a handful that have gotten, there's a lot that, there's a good number now that are actually passing, but only sort of a handful that has hit gold or silver. So it's something we've been, the security team's been working on for several years, and obviously with the whole TSC, and we're sort of proud that we've actually achieved that. And if you go to MITRE's site, you can see that we are actually listed there as a CNA, and you can find the email to mail vulnerabilities to our disclosure policy and our advisory policies are there, listed there explicitly. And when we talk about security, like I say, it is a journey. In 2020, we received our first bulk vulnerability report from NCC Group. And this gave us a chance to actually work on vulnerabilities and improve our processes further. So one of the things that was sort of interesting, up to that point, we've been seeing like 1 or 2 a quarter coming in from researchers in the field and so forth, when they spotted things that they thought we should fix. And we very much appreciated those. And then with NCC Group giving us this bulk vulnerability report, it sort of said, okay, well, because we were being taken seriously by the industry at this point, and we also decided to use this as a reason to do some fine tuning of other processes in the project. And most of the things that they reported resulted in one or more CVEs being established, and then we put out a release after we came out from embargo. So if you've that report, there's a link to the report in these slides. You're welcome to read it. A lot of the information in there is, into detailed level, but the results were most issues were fixed in a reasonable time, and they were complimentary about working with Zephyr, which was nice for us too. So we've seen another one since then, and have been sort of, working on these as they emerge in. Now, one of the things that the security team also focuses on is the crypto drivers and making sure we're using the same APIs for different implementations. Because in order to have the security, you want to make sure that you can have your communication channels can be secured. So there's various drivers provided by the hardware, and also there are software implementations if you don't have these in your hardware. And we're using the same API for both. So if you work to that API, it will be fairly effective, hopefully, in moving things forward for you. And again, more hardware security drivers and if there's other implementations that people want to see from the software side, this is all welcome, as does improvements to these projects. Now, I've mentioned the product security incident response team, or project security incident response team in our case. And not all vulnerabilities that show up in the media actually are vulnerabilities for certain projects. Now, we actually did have to issue an advisory to let people know that we were not affected by Amnesia 33. We did use FNet in the LTS. So that LTS I was mentioning before did have some FNet code in it, but the key parts that were impacted were not actually included in our source files. And so we had to go in and be very explicit that, hey, no, Zephyr is not affected by this vulnerability. And making that, being able to do that, we put that out as a blog post because there's no good way of saying that automatically these days. But we did want to let people know because we were getting questions. And there's a link here on the bottom to the blog post, and you're welcome to go and read details if you're interested in security issues. And then in other cases where we are impacted, the automation tracking is something that is being worked on in the industry as a whole, and we're trying to pick up with it. But when Bad Alloc came out recently, from under embargo, it had us listed wrong, and so we've been working with them to get us updated. And we've also have our disclosures now automated into Git. So it's a journey, and we're continuing to improve the processes as we move forward. And one of the other things that is exciting to me recently is when the cybersecurity executive order came out. With the 2.6 release, Zephyr is one of the only RTOSs out there that's able to generate a software bill of materials during the build as part of the West infrastructure. And we can actually, if you go through line by line here, I've got another presentation that sort of shows how Zephyr actually is able to address each of these things that are being called for as best practices from the executive order. And we're sort of already there with Zephyr, which is a good reason. The fact that we've been adopting all these best practices as we've been going along means we're not scrambling right now. We're actually sitting pretty well. Always room to improve, but as we can figure things out, we're sort of there. It also amused me, if you look at the very last line here, that they were asking for is ensuring and attesting to the extent practical to the integrity and provenance of the open source software within any portion of the product. Well, Zephyr itself is open source, so all of these above things pretty much apply. Now, the one other feature I'd like to highlight just before I get off security is if you are making products with Zephyr and you want to be notified about any of the vulnerabilities that are coming down in our embargo window, we have made it available for product makers. They can register for free to receive these alerts. This link in the slides, if you click on it, it will take you to our vulnerability alert registry. And what we're sort of doing is we do have a criteria. You have to, give us a contact, and you have to have some publicly listed product based on Zephyr. And we know that there's someone who will be monitoring things on your side. And that's pretty much all we're asking for. But, we don't want bad actors on here either. So we do need to make sure that, people are who they say they are and have products with Zephyr that are out in the field. But that is free for any product maker to register. And we would encourage you to do so if you have products and you want to be notified when there's updates to the LTS and so forth. Now, to sum it all up, I guess we've had the security committee has been working since 2016. The practices are documented. We have become a CVE numbering authority and gotten our best practices badge in 2018. And we're leveraging, obviously, the automation. We improved our vulnerability management further in 2020. And now we're doing the SBOM generation in 2021. So as you can see, security here for us is a journey. And we've been working towards it steadily and consistently for the last 5 years. Now, one of the new areas that we're working towards is going after safety certifications and being very transparent about how we're doing it. In 2019, the governing board decided that on 61508 as our first certification we were going to be tackling. And we have started working towards our coding guidelines, got sort of established last year. And we're busy working on implementing them and getting regression infrastructure in place so that we can detect. So we'll be moving the code up to these guidelines with the support of the TSC and the developer community. You'll be seeing sort of changes going in that direction. And then once one of the rules has been established, it'll be added to the automatic regression testing so that we don't come out of compliance with the guidelines going forward. And we're already passing the project quality goals defined by CII. You can look at that from the badging project I was showing you earlier. But key for us for this is going to be the regressions. We've got to prevent the regressions, and we've got to use automation because there's so many factors here. So continuing with Coverity scans, but we're adding the MISRA scans as well, and we're going to be also looking for other options to help us with moving this all forward and keeping it up to date. Because at the heart of it all, we have to have that quality there. And the best way for us, we found, is to not sort of add quality in afterwards, but bake it in during development. So we'll probably be enhancing the checks that happen on commits after this, as we go forward to make sure that we can sort of keep this base in a way that we can go after these certifications. And the subset I was talking about earlier that we are working with is we're working with our public APIs effectively, and then the file system logging and devices models are going to be there, as well as key kernel services and power management. And these subsets of that overall model are our first target. We're probably the first target. There's a plan for successively expanding these components from our code base and getting all the traceability and everything else put in place. But we're starting with this core nugget to work our way through it, and then expanding out. So updates on this part will be in the safety mini-conf, as well as some of the talks. So if you're curious about what we're doing with safety certification, I'd encourage you to go there. And the collateral that we're working towards, some of it's going to be public, and then some of it's going to be restricted to the members, because as you can imagine, this costs a lot to work with the certification authorities, and it's our platinum members that are effectively putting up the funding to let us do this. So we're moving it forward in that direction. And the project has actually just finished contracting a functional safety manager to work with us, with the teams, to move everything forward. So you should be seeing her sort of starting to show up in some places in the next 6 months. Now, Zephyr is not just one configuration. It's very modular, as we've said, and so there's a wide range of circumstances we'll be considering over time. And we'll be starting small and then working our way through all of these. But Zephyr can be used in any of these types of scenarios. And so we do need to keep this all in mind as we're moving ourselves forward. Now, how have we actually done all this? Well, at the heart of Zephyr is a technical steering committee. And one of the principles that the Linux Foundation believes is we need to separate business decisions from meritocracies and technical decisions. This is one of the reasons Linux has been so successful, is it's based on merit what goes into the kernel. And there's a hierarchy of trust that has been established amongst the maintainers. And we've done what we can to sort of replicate an equivalent here in Zephyr. Now, rather though than one sort of one person dictator for life type of strategy, I think we actually in Zephyr have a technical steering committee, and the chair of the technical steering committee is elected every 2 years. We just actually finished going through our rotation period on that, and I want to thank Maureen for being the TSC chair for the last 2 years. She stepped aside to do some other things, and Anas Nashif has been elected to be our TSC chair for the project. Now the TSC meets every week, and it is open to anyone to attend. Anyone is able to attend that's interested. The information is all public. And this is where the decisions get made about release criteria. If there's multiple competing solutions, that's what gets decided there. And as well as various other discussions for applying policies and so forth at the technical level, and figuring out maintainers and these types of things. So that is at the heart. Anyone from the community can participate in the code repositories. You do not need to be a member to participate, and you do not need to be a member to attend the TSC meetings. Like I say, everything is open here. Individual contributors, organizations, all are welcome to be contributing to the project, whether they've signed the membership agreements or not. But all these contributions are welcome, and it's what helped make Zephyr very vibrant and effective for our people. Now, the chair of the TSC sits on the governing board, and the governing board is, as I said, responsible for the financial decisions. And they sort of set the overall sort of objectives, like we're going after 61508 as opposed to some other safety standard. That's sort of a governing board decision. And they also oversee what we're doing in terms of marketing, and then the safety committee and the security committees are reporting into the governing board, but their architects have voting rights on the technical steering committee. So we're trying to keep things sort of synced a bit, but making sure that we do have this type of governance, that people feel that they can contribute where they want effectively. And this has resulted in a very healthy, vibrant community. We're coming up on getting almost 1,000 contributors into the project now. We're sort of growing at about 20, 25 a month. So it's not unlikely we'll see over 1,000 contributors into Zephyr, in a month and a half's time. And no one company is dominating what's going into the code base. When the project started, Intel and Wind River were the two that sort of launched it out. And over time, you've seen this diversity emerge. And it isn't like Intel or has been slowing down on its contributions either. So I think we've got a rather healthy ecosystem emerging, and looking forward to seeing it continue to diversify over time. Now, with all these people participating, there's a lot of commits happening. Over the life of the project, there's been over 50,000 commits, which is, I believe, the one open source project in the RTOS space with the most commits now. So that we sort of hit that milestone a while back too. And all these commits are doing things like adding boards, adding device drivers, and adding functionality. In addition to, as we find bugs, they get fixed. So the code base is moving, and there's a lot of new features in. And so hopefully if there's new technologies that are being, emerging that you're interested in, you'll be able to work with Zephyr and see if the code that you're interested in or the features you're interested in is already there. One of the things that we can sort of see is the traffic as happening in the project. And this is a snapshot taken just last couple days ago. And from it, you can sort of see that, on 5/27, there was over, 426 unique loaners working with the repo. So there's a lot of people actively working with it on a day-to-day basis. And then over a 2-week period, there was over 3,000 unique cloners for that whole window. So people are active, they're developing with it, and that means there's products happening. So the challenge now for us is figuring out where some of those products are so we can make them visible on those earlier slides you saw. And if you're interested in trying to understand what's happening with Zephyr, we have a very active Twitter following, and we try to post interesting things that are new there. The heart of the community has gravitated around working in Slack and is able to ask quick questions and find people and the maintainers hanging out there and asking questions about certain subcomponents or things that are puzzling them, so forth, and coordinate amongst the various teams. So I think, one of the things, if you're interested in doing development with Zephyr, I'd encourage you to join the Slack channels. And if you're looking at figuring out, what's new and exciting happening at the project, follow the Zephyr on Twitter. And also, we do tend to post some of the key things into LinkedIn. And we do have a WeChat group over in China for those who are working from inside that domain. So we are trying to, help communities form and help them support each other, because it's like I say, this is a global community. Now, if you're interested in reading more after this, there's further orientation information on how to participate. And, you can look at our latest version of the docs. I encourage you starting there. And I also encourage you, quite frankly, to just go in the code. Hopefully you'll find it reasonably straightforward to navigate through and look for the pieces you're interested in. We do have a set of mail lists that you're welcome to subscribe to. And we do have this link for Slack. So in these slides, we'll be making this information available. And you click the links and just follow up along in there. And, and subscribe to where you're interested in. We'll also be having on Slack a couple of channels for this conference. So there will be things that will go on in the chat potentially, but stuff in the Slack will also be there for things that once the session ends, people can go and continue conversations there. And with that, I probably want to just say thank you to our Zephyr Project members who actually made this Developer Summit possible. We could not have done it without their support and growth. And so in particular, our Platinum members, Facebook, Google, Intel, Nordic, NXP, and Oticon. They've been helping provide a lot of the leadership. And then we've got a lot of really innovative new technologies emerging with our Silver members. So I encourage you to sort of check them out. And we do have more members, but these are the ones that are comfortable being publicly listed. So with that, I will say thank you. And I am going to stop sharing and go and see if there's any questions that have come in. Now, if you have questions, please go into the conversation mode. And some people have been helping answer questions too. And I'll start answering some of the questions. So raise your hand and we'll try to take you off mute if you want to ask a question. Otherwise, I will start answering. Okay, Charles Carkey's got one. Go for it. Where will the slides be available? Is that the question? Or Brett, do you want to?
No, there's actually a different one. What's the time frame for safety certification on an LTS release?
So when the LTS release is coming out is the next release in about 4 months' time, and then we're going to be starting and working it. So you'll probably be seeing some of this emerging early next year.
Okay,
For
good.
1.5
And
OS.
sessions will be available via what source?
What? Sorry.
How will slides get to
Oh.
attendees?
Yep.
So go ahead, Brett. Go for it.
Yeah, no worries. So as presenters make them available, we'll be adding it to the docs page that includes the abstracts and speaker information.
And the docs page is where?
Yep. I'll put a link into the chat window.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, in the meeting invite that came out for the project for this session, even there was a docs link, and it was sent out to all people as they serve registered, and that's where we're keeping the agenda for this, as well as the latest updates, and we'll paste the links to the slides and to the videos in there. So there'll be one Google Doc that let you master link to everything. Okay. That help, Charles? So.
Yes, that was good. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Okay, who else do we have interested in talking? A couple more hands raised. Press?
Yep, and folks should be able to come off mute, actually. I didn't have to remove Charles. So Prayas, I see a hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so do you have any location or any space available where I can see maybe the future releases or the future features?
Yeah.
Maybe coming in the month or maybe in a year?
Yeah, we actually have a dashboard. The project is a dashboard. Just a second, let me clear it up and go back into screen share mode. So there is a release plan project in the repo. And let me go into screen share. Back again. So it'll get updated a little bit more next week after we put the 2.6 release out, and everything will be updated. And you'll see what's going on in 2.7. But this is where the links are to the key elements that we're working on for the release.
Okay.
And the release meeting that meets every week and is open again to people to attend. And so it's up on our project calendar, and you're welcome to sort of go into it and look and attend if you've got specific questions about certain things. But I'd say the Slack usually is able to answer most things, or opening issues too. Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. See if there's, okay, let's lower the hands, I guess. And, okay, let's see, what else? Okay, and then I think it looks like Carlos has been answering some questions about the cooperative threads, and system threads are cooperative. Okay. And so in the chat, Adib is asking, will 2.6 be released in October? Actually, it'll be 2.7. 2.6 is going to be released probably tomorrow or today or sometime in the next couple of days. We're just getting the last set of bugs shown out, as David has been answering in the chat. Perfect. And then let's see if there's anything else. Miltiadis, I'm sorry if I'm mangling your name, my apologies, is asking, are free RTOS, tiny RTOS, contiguous, Riot, ROS rivals, especially for small devices? I think they're competing, so, there's competing options that are out there, and they're all, they're options that are available in the market right now. But yeah, Zephyr is playing definitely in that space. Although we are working, Ross actually is working with Zephyr. So there's some, cooperation going on in some of these places too. Where the licenses are compatible, some of these projects will share back and forth between each other. So the ones that are also Apache, sometimes, drivers make it in one place and then we'll move it to the other if their licenses are compatible. That's why we pay a lot of attention to our licensing in the project, so that we do have that ability. And we have the ability to generate, pretty easy to know that you've got the entire code base clean with no little surprises lurking in there somewhere, which is useful for people making products. Okay, let's go back and see if there's any other questions. Okay, Manuel's raised his hand. Manuel, you want to go on?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, well, I found out about the Zephyr OS like a couple of days ago, and I've been reading and watching videos, and I just want to ask, this is based on kind of this similar idea to Linux, and just as Linux is, for example, everyone that has a computer wants to use Linux, they don't write the drivers and write stuff for Linux. You just choose a distro, and the distro is going to have all the drivers you need, etc. So you just install it. So is the idea of Zephyr being something like this for the micro world? Like, there's a lot of RTOSs out there with a lot of drivers and libraries, etc. But I see that this has the potential to be a universal OS with a lot of drivers and kind of have something similar to Linux, but for microcontrollers. Is that the idea?
That's exactly the idea. And we have had people that are working on creating reference equivalents of distros for Zephyr and putting them out with support. So there are various people that are sort of working in that space sort of already.
Okay.
So go check out our website, and you can sort of see some of the members and what they have offerings. And then there's a lot more out in the ecosystem. We're hoping to have more of that part of the ecosystem made visible this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. This has the potential of substituting everything that is out there and have a universal OS that just works and has high security and all that. So which is really nice.
Yeah, well, like I say, we're trying to be a good second option for people if they, so that especially we prefer them to sort of work with us rather than rolling their own, because they've got more of the security stuff to draw off of. Exactly.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Thank you for the question. Let me see if there's anything else I've missed. Okay, it looks like Carl's answered Priyas's question. That's great. Thanks for answering questions as we go along, Carl's much appreciated. Just trying to see if there's anything in the chat that hasn't been answered. Okay.
I'm not sure, Kate, if if my answer was explicit enough about the pull request. Of course, a contributor, because I think Dimitris asked how to become a contributor. Of course, by definition, a contributor is someone who contributes code or documentation or anything else to the repositories that we have. But of course, maybe that's not the answer Dimitris was looking for. Maybe I was looking for something that a little bit more concrete. I just want to mention that we have a series of good first issues in the issue tracker on GitHub. So that is one option to try to find something if you're not sure what area to contribute in and you don't have a specific goal, but rather just to start contributing, start helping out. That might be a good idea to browse through those. I can send the link to those.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
And then Keith's asking, can you expand on how one is promoted from a contributor to a collaborator? It tends to be establishing effectively a trust relationship with the other collaborators in that, and they get tired of basically they sort of know that they can trust the code they're getting from you, and so they'll bring you into the collaborator pool and invite you to be a part of the collaborator pool. And maintainers, determine, who's working with them on the collaborators. So we've got it all documented as well. We do have our processes documented. I don't know if one of you guys.
Yeah, I can post a link. Kate.
Perfect. That'd be great. Because and this is something that we keep working on improving for the project. It's something that we, it's not static, and as we learn and as the project grows, we have to adjust our processes to better work with the dynamic. I'm seeing that Colvin has his hand up. You want to unmute and ask a question?
Yes, good evening. Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to touch on how documentation is handled in the product or in the project. Sorry. As a beginner to the project, what I found was I would run into issues, maybe specifically with building development environments, and digging through various vendors' documentation. It wouldn't always agree with the official documentation, and even various revisions of the official documentation would have changes between releases that weren't really documented.
Yeah. Well, when it's not, if something is not, it's inaccurate in the documentation, it's a bug. And if you spot it, please let us know. But they're all available for anyone to call. You know, that's how we keep the quality effort. It's basically people telling us that the problem. Like people, you know, developers, when they're actually putting in the changes and so forth, will make an effort to update the documentation. But again, multiple factors, and sometimes things slip through. So, but most of the code is being extracted from, like most of the documentation is being extracted from the code already. And so, like I say, we try to keep things, you know, close to the source of change and then reflected in a nice digestible format in the documentation. But if something is inaccurate, we definitely want to know.
I guess it falls into the gray area sometimes of a vendor who provides an easy to follow guide to build a tool chain versus the official documents. And should you direct the bug to the vendor, or should you direct it to the project?
Yeah, you direct it to where it's wrong and isn't matching. We actually, if you actually looked at our documentation right now, you'll actually see it is versioned with the release, because as the code base changes underneath, the release changes. So the documentation that is there for the, you know, 3 releases ago is going to be different than the documentation for what the code base looks like today. But you still may need to access something from 3 years, you know, 3 releases ago, and that is something that is pretty key. That we need to do for, you know, some of the safety reasons too, in terms of you have to be able to know exactly what you're referring to at a point in time. So that.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
And let me add on that one though. If you're unsure of where the bug goes, you can submit an issue report on our project, and we have a weekly meeting where we do some rough triage on every single bug, and if it's determined to be with a vendor, we can close it out and move it over to the vendor, or get that vendor to take it on.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Just one more clarification regarding this question about documentation sometimes being out of date, is that if in some vendors, as someone asks also in the chat, use Zephyr, but they might not be automatically using the latest release. So it might be an earlier release, and therefore the documentation has moved on. So if you look at the Zephyr documentation for a particular vendor SDK and then compare it to the latest in the Zephyr upstream project, the vanilla, the open source project, they may differ, but that's a bit unavoidable. Because, well, things evolve, and certain releases are based on fixed points, on fixed milestones that have been reached in the past. So, but you know, any feedback welcome to make this better for newcomers to avoid confusion.
Okay. Well, I think with that, we're just about at the top of the hour. So I want to thank everyone for coming, and looking forward to interacting with you more next week on our first Developer Summit. And thanks again for everyone who's jumped in to help with answering questions in the chat as we've been going along. Much appreciated. Take care and have a good day. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, Gabe. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.